Hello, my name is Professor Graham Virgo and I'm the Senior Pro-Vice-Chancellor at the University of Cambridge with particular responsibility for education. And I'm delighted to welcome you to this Cambridge Conversation, our popular series which is bringing to you, wherever you might be, Cambridge ideas and research. I'm going to be hosting and moderating today's digital event, and I'm going to be having a conversation in a few minutes with 3 research students. And after that, there'll be around 20 minutes where our speakers will be able to respond to audience questions. You can submit a question at any point by clicking on the Q&A box, which is at the bottom of the page, and typing your question. This event is being recorded and it will be shared on our YouTube channel. This has been, as you are all well aware, an extremely unusual year, and it's been very different in the University of Cambridge this year. We have had a university where most of our teaching, certainly our lectures, have been recorded and have been online. We have had a fair amount of in-person teaching, but there have been many restrictions on what we have been able to do. And the student experience has been very different this year. And there's still a lot of uncertainty about what next term, Easter term, is going to look like. We are hoping that as many students as possible will be back in Cambridge, but we have all sorts of contingency plans in place. And in fact, most of our exams are going to be online, even if students are in Cambridge to take those exams. But crucially, despite all the uncertainty and the difficulty, education has continued at the University of Cambridge, and research has continued at the University of Cambridge. That research continues to be life-changing and responding to the challenges of the 21st century in a wide variety of areas of academic discipline. Our postgraduate students are fundamental to our research, and they have continued their studies throughout the pandemic, whether they've been in Cambridge or in towns and cities all over the world. And we are desperate to see all our students back in Cambridge. We remain inspired by the talent and the tenacity of our students, and I have been incredibly impressed by the way they have adapted their research projects in really challenging circumstances and managed to continue with their world-beating research. And we have been working really hard within the university to ensure that our students have the best experience they possibly can have, whether it's in Cambridge or around the world. I do want to pay tribute to my colleagues who have been working so hard to support our students, because supporting our students is fundamental to us. Without our students, we are no longer a university. Our Student Support Initiative aims to reach, support, and fund students with great potential from all over the world. It covers undergraduates, it covers postgraduates, and it also ensures their well-being. It ensures that students will get the best out of their experience from being at Cambridge. Remaining one of the preeminent universities in the world means that it is vital that we attract the very best students whose ideas and ability will change the world. And today's panelists are three formidable examples of the many doctoral students who are conducting research across Cambridge. So let me introduce them. First, Rumbidzai Dube is a Gates Cambridge scholar who is studying within the Department of Politics and International Studies. Sian Gooding is a Harding Distinguished Postgraduate Scholar who is studying in the Faculty of Computer Science and Technology. And Nilesh Chatterjee is also a Harding Distinguished Postgraduate Scholar studying in the Department of Pharmacology. And I'm delighted to welcome the three of them. Between them, and they're going to say a little bit more about their research in a minute, they are tackling inequality and international law, disadvantage caused by low levels of literacy, and the development of potential treatment for cancer. Without any of these three students, and in fact, without any of our amazing students, Cambridge would be the poorer. And so too would the future for those communities on which their research will have a profound effect. So now over to the three of you to have a conversation. You each are working in very different areas and you have adopted different routes to get to Cambridge. And it's quite clear, and I've read your profiles, that you are doing remarkable work that really does have the potential to change lives and change the world. So to start with, I am going to set all three of you a challenge. And I want you to describe your research and what it will achieve in just 2 sentences. And I know that's incredibly difficult, just to summarize the importance of your research so briefly, but I've set you that challenge. So, Rumbidzai, you are an experienced international lawyer and you're studying for your PhD in politics and international studies. So what are your 2 sentences?
I would say my research is really about understanding how historical trajectories of international law influence the contemporary politics of the African Union, and how I'm hoping this will change something in the world is I'm hoping it provides new parameters for understanding international law and how it impacts different regions and how those different regions respond to the ways in which international law develops to find their place in the world.
Great, thank you very much. Right, Sian, your turn. Your PhD is within the Faculty of Computer Science and Technology, but it's about language and reading. So what is your 2-sentence summary?
My research, it's all about text simplification, which is really how can we adapt text to suit different levels of audiences. So we know that, for instance, the words that you find difficult to read will be different to the words that I find difficult to read. And there's all sorts of factors that can impact that, such as your first language, your educational background. So I'm building applications that can simplify text for all these different audiences when you understand their background.
Great, thank you. And finally, Nilesh, your PhD is within the Department of Pharmacology, and you are researching a new way of dealing with cancer. So what is your 2-sentence summary?
My research is about trying to use the one common thread between 90% of cancers and use that to actually kill the cancer cell. And I hope, if it goes well in the future along the line, it can be used in clinics as like an early treatment for cancer before you know its specifics.
Thank you very much. Well done, all three of you. Excellent summaries. And I've got a sense of what your research is now. And it's clear this is really exciting and really important research that has the potential to change lives. I'm particularly interested in how you came to your research and how you came to Cambridge as well, the route to Cambridge. So Rumbidzai, I know that you have been working as a lawyer before you came to Cambridge. And then when you came to Cambridge, you first came as a Chevening Scholar to undertake your MPhil, and you're now a Gates Scholar completing your doctorate. Why did you decide to undertake further study, and what drew you to Cambridge in particular?
So coming to Cambridge was a journey that was spurred mostly by a sense of wanting to discover new knowledge and to challenge existing knowledge. I had worked in development for a while, and I had developed a sense of disillusionment with development as a method of trying to address Africa's underdevelopment concerns. And I wondered why certain issues were disconnected from the real issues that I was seeing on the ground. For instance, if development is serious about eradicating poverty, why was that conversation disconnected from other conversations such as colonial reparations, such as addressing imbalances of power within the World Trade Organization, such as debt forgiveness, for instance, for underdeveloped countries. And so I wanted to address the root causes of Africa's underdevelopment by sort of interrogating these global power structures and how they continue to affect Africa, specifically as a continent. So in coming to Cambridge, I obviously went into the MPhil in African Studies because I wanted to understand how the world sees Africa, and then how Africa itself sees itself and places itself within these conversations. And I wanted my research to contribute to developing these understandings of Africa that are drawn out of Africa's own sense of who it is, and challenging existing knowledge systems that pathologize Africa and its issues. So that was mostly what drove me to come to Cambridge, because I understood Cambridge as a place of great research and resources and networks. And so that's how I ended up here.
And how is your research going? What stage are you at in your doctoral research?
So it's been a very difficult time because of COVID-19. I should have been on my fieldwork right now, yeah, in Ethiopia. But because of complications with COVID, I have not been able to do that. So I am in the process of doing my fieldwork, mostly utilizing online resources and talking to some people on the ground. And that's where I am at the moment.
Thank you. So Sian, over to you. I know your career trajectory is an unusual one, and I believe you didn't go to university straight after school. So perhaps you could tell us a little bit about what drew you to computer science and what drew you to Cambridge as well.
Sure. So I think, ironically, it's been the things in my life that I didn't enjoy that have kind of shaped the path to getting here to do something that I really, really do enjoy. So to start off with, I was really fortunate because when I was younger, I had access to a computer. My parents got me a computer. So I didn't actually have the internet access, but I used to draw things on Microsoft Paint and kind of make PowerPoints and all this sort of stuff. And, you know, I just really loved it as a tool for creativity. That's what the computer was to me. I think, unfortunately, I didn't really know of computer science as a concept or as something that you could study until much later on. And I hope that that's changing actually in schools because, for instance, computer science wasn't really offered at A-level in the school that I was at. And the A-levels that I did do, so I did kind of like maths and physics, I was just really disillusioned with it. I just thought, what's the point? How can I use this? And I guess that's quite naive looking back, but I'm very much driven by practically how can I use things. So I dropped out. And I got a job at PC World because I knew that I liked computers. And I think that was such an amazing experience for me for two reasons. First of all, the reality of working a kind of retail job was very enlightening for me. But I think it gave me this opportunity to really see computers, work with computers, talk about them and discover that passion. And I started thinking, I want to learn more, I want to know more about how these things work. And then at that point, I realized, I looked at all the degrees and I saw you could do computer science. And I thought, that's so amazing. That's really cool. It's a science and you can go and you can learn all these things. So I redid my A-levels whilst I was working at PC World and got into Birmingham University. And, you know, that experience changed my life because I absolutely loved it. Although I will say it was a very, very steep learning curve because I hadn't had any experience with programming. And I think obviously a lot of people had done this computer science A-level. And also, you know, I was in the minority being a British female in computer science. And I really hope that that begins to change too. And I think it is changing. So did this computer science degree, got a first, was really, really happy. And then I got this job in industry and hated it, just really didn't enjoy it. And, you know, it really started making me think, well, what is it that I do enjoy? Because it was a technical job. But I think it was when I really realised I am just a researcher at heart because I'm very, very curious. I have all these questions and I want to answer them and I want to do experiments. And so I thought, okay, maybe I should try and do a master's. And at that point, I didn't know how I was going to be able to afford it. But I was thinking, if I have to save up to go and do this, I want to go to the best place in the world, you know, for computer science, Cambridge. And so I applied and I was very, very shocked, if I'm honest, when I got in. But, you know, the rest is history, because I think from the minute that I got here, I've loved it. I've just every day almost feels like a dream, you know, doing a PhD here. So I think that's kind of a very quick story of how I got here. But, you know, it was really these periods of these moments of, I don't like this, but what do I actually really like, that now I'm very, very appreciative of being able to do something that I love so much. So
excellent, really good. Okay, I'm delighted that you are in Cambridge. So how is your research going at the moment?
I think it's going well. I mean, you know, obviously the pandemic has presented a set of its own problems, but I think for me, it's made me even more focused on why the research is very important, because the education gap now from children who have had to kind of online learning and having to learn from home has meant that there's big gaps for people who are disadvantaged. And, you know, my PhD is all about how do we build these tools to help people read? How do we build tools to help people up their literacy? And I think it's more relevant than ever now that we look at technologies to do that. So, yeah. Absolutely.
I mean, I could not agree more. I mean, I'm increasingly concerned about impact of the pandemic on learning loss across the board. And we all need to work hard to support people through that. Great, thank you. So Nilesh, over to you. So why gene therapy and why Cambridge?
So I always love the idea of genes because they're our biology. If you understand and can play with genes, you can do anything to the human biology or the biology of any organism for that matter. And that has so many implications in therapeutics because so many current diseases are all from your genes. Most untreatable diseases are genetic, complex or simple, they're still genetic. And that's why I was so interested in learning about gene therapy and using techniques associated with gene therapy in order to develop treatments for complex diseases like cancer. And Cambridge, because I didn't want to do a PhD doing a project that had already been conceived, and it was just a part of the lab. I came up with my own project during my undergraduate studies, and that's the project I wanted to do. It wouldn't be worth it doing something otherwise because the money, the time, and Cambridge was essentially the place that accepted me, that had a supervisor who was generous enough to allow me to use her lab and freely do the research that I wanted to do, which was amazing. It was one of the most inspiring things I've ever had happen to me.
Brilliant. And how is your research going at the moment?
Well, this is the first period of long-term research I've ever done, and I didn't realize the complexities, especially with biological systems and how fragile and variable they are. So it is quite tricky. Luckily for me, the pandemic hasn't affected me that much because my department is small. So it's been open with to full capacity since June last year. So I've been able to get on with my research as I'd intended to, which is really nice. But yeah, so I've been lucky, but the research is still quite tricky.
Okay, right. Yeah, it's always going to be complex and tricky, but at least the opportunities are still there. Okay. So Sian and Nilesh, I know that each of you have a Harding scholarship, which covers your fees and expenses at Cambridge. And I particularly know that because I actually chaired the committee that awarded those scholarships, and I can remember seeing your application. So I'm delighted that you got a Harding Scholarship. And it is a scholarship that's designed to attract brilliant researchers from all over the world. So what has it meant to both of you to have that scholarship? Sian, shall we start with you first?
Sure. Well, I mean, it's enabled me to kind of enable my passion for research, really, because there's no way that I could be doing a PhD without the funding. And I think the Harding Scholarship in particular, there's many things that I really like about it. I mean, and I know we'll probably talk about the community aspect, but yeah. I think the Harding Scholarship, first and foremost, has put me in connection with so many amazing and interesting people. And one of the things that's personally really helped my research is that we have this personal research allowance where each year you get some money that can go towards research costs. And I think what has been really, really good about that for me is that obviously the tools that I'm building tools for people in need of text simplification, in need of education. And I think sometimes it can be very difficult actually getting these tools in the hands of users and participants to try them out. So the research allowance in particular for me has enabled me to get participants and actually get people to use the technologies that I'm making, which, you know, it's just been fantastic to see. So
excellent. That was the intention behind it. So delighted that that's working out. And Nilesh, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, especially for me, I think I completely agree with everything Sian said. Like, the research allowance is so useful to us because it just gives us that extra push to use it to do things better, essentially, simplest word. But to me, as an international student, coming to Cambridge with the expensive fees would have been pretty much impossible without the scholarship. So yeah, there's no other way I could have done the research here.
Good. But it served its purpose, that it's funding your research. And Rumbidzai, I know that you are in Cambridge as a Gates Scholar now. That's a scholarship inspired by the late Bill Gates Sr. and intended to attract international students and to support international students at Cambridge, particularly those with a mission to change the world for the better. So can you tell us a bit about what it means to you to be a Gates Cambridge Scholar?
Yeah, so the scholarship really is driven by a set of values, as you've said, right? That it requires individuals who have a desire to lead in their communities and who are committed to improving the lives of others. And so even in the criteria that the scholarship uses in selecting the different scholars, that those are some of the qualities that they prioritize when they look at your past profile and what you've done and what you say you intend to do with your research and after your research. And so I carry that responsibility very proudly, but also very humbly, because in my cohort, I was only one of 6 African scholars amongst a cohort of about 90 something. And so it's very competitive, but at the same time, because of the values that underpin the scholarship itself, you already are driven to become this individual who aspires to bring about change in their community and who is motivated to through their research and through their personhood, really, to bring about change in their community. And I, just like Nilesh and Sian, I wouldn't be in Cambridge without this scholarship. I mean, the fees is off the charts. It's too expensive. I wouldn't have been able to afford it at all. But beyond the financial support that Gates actually provides, it also creates a community of scholars who are doing research in different fields. Because there's a lot of us doing research in the arts, in humanities, in social sciences, political sciences, natural sciences. And that community in itself, it gives you a sense of belonging. Because I mean, Cambridge can be a very alienating space, especially if you are an international student who is coming to the UK for the first time. You don't understand the culture. You are in the space that is very imposing and intimidating. And so having that particular community, starting with the orientation that Gates gives at the beginning of your course, kind of paves your way into Cambridge life. And the community also organizes a lot of events throughout the year that bring scholars together and just creates this amazing community. So I mean, that's what the scholarship means to me. It was my opportunity to be in Cambridge, to be able to do this research, but it has also given me a space for me to create this amazing network of individuals that I know I will be a part of for the rest of my life.
Yeah, and I think that community, that network is a really important part of both Harding scholars and Gates Cambridge scholars as well. And Sian, you mentioned the community aspect, and obviously that is a research network, but it also opportunities for extracurricular activities. So what kind of communities have you found in Cambridge, and how have they helped you?
I think you're just so spoilt for choice here, because you have your collegiate community, we have our Harding community. I have met so many interesting people. I'll never forget, actually, from the Harding Scholarship, the first time we all met at the very beginning, and we were in this room of 30 Harding scholars, and the buzz and excitement of being around people from all over the world, studying all different types of things. And I think the one thing that really united everyone in that room was the passion and how happy everyone was to kind of be there. And I think this is something that I've really noticed across all the different people that I've met in Cambridge. There's this passion that drives you to be here and unites people. And I think the communities in particular as well that I've really enjoyed are some of the ones that you probably wouldn't associate as much with the kind of studying side of things. So I joined Zumba just around the corner from the lab, and I love Zumba so much. And I that was just because there were a few people in the lab, and they said, oh, should we go to Zumba? It's just around the corner. And I thought, oh, I'll give it a go. And I absolutely love it. But there's so many different extracurricular activities, like Darwin salsa. That's another thing that is absolutely amazing. So I think it's one thing that's just, we're so fortunate to be here. And obviously the pandemic for now, even though there's been a lot of online activities, and I think the Harding scholars in particular have fantastic reps for social reps, and a lot of online events. So yeah, so many opportunities.
Yeah, I mean, obviously there are other opportunities when we don't have a pandemic, but I've been really impressed with the way students have managed to connect and support each other, even if it's remotely. Rumbidzai, I know that you are not now at the moment in Cambridge, but when you have been in Cambridge, you particularly enjoyed participating in the African Studies Centre. So can you tell us a bit about the difference that and being in Cambridge has made to you?
Yeah, so I mean, the African Studies Center is like this culturally safe space, right? It's like the space where Africans come together and hang out. Basically, it's a space where you drop off the formality of being in Cambridge, of speaking in academic speak, and you're just relaxed and talking about the politics back home, about the difficulties of being in a researcher, but not in this very formal way, right? So it's a great resource as well, because it hosts the African Studies Center Library, which is one of the few resources in Cambridge that is a collation of so many resources on Africa. And the librarian in that center also understands that our research is very specific, and sometimes with very specific questions, which are considered niche, it's difficult to justify having the relevant resources when they can't be distributed to a group of students because they're on some reading list, right? You're the only person who is researching this particular thing about this particular place, because maybe no one has ever done it before, or you're the first person from that country to be doing that particular work in Cambridge. So that aspect of the African Studies Center just makes it this really amazing space. And because it's also a space where we just come to relax, is this place where you feel comfortable. It's the one place within the different faculties that I felt comfortable enough to come and eat my sadza, you know, which is like my staple in Zimbabwe. And sitting next to me would be people who are also eating their jollof or, you know, from Nigeria or Ghana, or chapati from East Africa, or injera from Ethiopia. So it's like this very culturally aware, culturally safe space that just makes you, it creates a kind of bubble in Cambridge that makes you really happy to be in some kind of home, away from home. And it also helped that my supervisor, who also happens to be the director of the MPhil in African Studies, Dr. Adam Branch, runs the center. So being in the center at times also created this rapport between him and I that helped us to develop a very healthy relationship, beyond academics. So I love the center.
Okay, excellent. That's really impressive, really impressive. Okay, so Nilesh, I understand that during this last year, your extracurricular activities have led you in a new direction, and you've identified a new passion. So can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, of course. So at the peak of the first wave in the UK, we were all told to go back home, but I couldn't go back home because that's Thailand. So I went to stay in London with some family there, and I wanted to get involved. I saw the nurses, the healthcare workers putting their lives on the line every day, and I wanted to help out. I wanted to be a part of that. So I started volunteering every day. I volunteered at food banks and in the hospitals, delivering food and essential goods to people who were underprivileged or who had lost their jobs or who were shielding because of COVID. And in the hospitals, we were essentially talking to patients because they get lonely if they're shielding, and then the only people they see are the staff who they've seen repetitively. They haven't seen family through such difficult times in their lives. And it's so sad that the pandemic affected them, not only health-wise, but family-wise, and being in touch with loved ones. So I was honored to be able to be a part of that. And the moment I realized that that's where I wanted to be and that's what I wanted to do was when I was actually talking to a patient on renal dialysis for chronic kidney disease who had to come into the renal center every other day to undergo dialysis, quite a long and tiring procedure. And all she wanted to talk to me about was how amazing life was and how happy she was to be alive. And I have never felt that inspired in my life. And those are the kind of people I want to be working with and working for. As a healthcare worker, as a doctor, I want to be able to serve these people, these amazing, inspiring patients, and help them. And I think that's what's really changed my perspective on the world and on life. And that's the way I want to go in the future after the PhD, towards medicine.
So that is the new direction. So after your doctorate, medicine is what is calling you. Excellent. So really briefly, because I do want to make sure we have time to take questions from people out there. But Rumbidzai, what is next for you after your research, after your doctorate?
I'm going back home, and by home, I mean Africa. I want to work within regional organizations in Africa in shaping African policies, particularly international legal issues that are closely connected to my thesis. And as I said before, I'm looking specifically at questions of territoriality and sovereignty in respect to three specific issues, right? Maritime governance, Africa's border politics, and international criminal justice. So I want to go back, contribute to the African Union, SADC, or any one of those organizations that are working to develop positions on these three issues.
Excellent. And Sian, finally for you, what is next after your doctorate?
Well, I think it's a shock to people when I say 7.1 million adults in the UK are functionally illiterate. So it means they have a level at or below that of an 11-year-old. And it's not just adults, this impacts children as well. 1 in 5 15-year-olds struggle to read and write. And obviously that impacts all of the areas of their life. So I'm spending the PhD researching what is it that makes text difficult. And, you know, I'm building tools, not necessarily to bring the level of text down, but to bring the level of people's literacy up. what I want to do after the PhD is we need to get these tools into the hands of users. And I think that there's a wide kind of array of ways that we can do this, but one of them might be kind of commercializing it or talking to the government about how can we actually get these tools out to the people that actually need them to be able to learn. So
great, excellent. Thank you very much for that. So we are now going to shift to a number of questions that have been coming in. If anybody else does want to ask any questions of our panelists, please do put the questions in the Q&A box. I'm going to ask a question for all three of you first, and please jump in as you wish. What would you say to encourage other students who might think Cambridge isn't for them?
I can jump in. Yeah, I mean, I never ever would have, I think, seen myself at Cambridge, especially doing a PhD. I think that it's difficult because sometimes you can't be what you don't see. And I think that having the representation of people from places in society that might not typically be associated with Cambridge is really powerful and a really good thing. I would say that you shouldn't see it as Cambridge first, you should see it as passion first. For me, that's how it worked out. So I was passionate about the subject, and I think if you have something that you're passionate about and you want to study, there's probably very few places that can beat Cambridge for that, because as I said, that's the one thing that unites everyone here. And there is a place for you, you know, if you want to be here and you want to learn.
Great, thank you. Nilesh, do you want to have a go at that one?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of people, when they're thinking of applying to Cambridge, might actually be a little bit scared because of its international reputation and how we speak about Cambridge like the best in so many subjects. And people might not think they're the best or they deserve to be there. But honestly, it's more about the people and the researchers and how kind and welcoming they are and how much they can support you to be your best. And I think that's what makes Cambridge Cambridge. And hopefully that can help people realize that they may think Cambridge isn't for them, but they won't know until they try it out.
Great, thank you. And Rumbidzai, anything you want to say to that one?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, one of the most important factors about coming to Cambridge, especially as a researcher, is about getting a good fit with a supervisor. And I think a lot of people feel intimidated because they do not know what's in store for them when they come. But if one does their research and first of all establish some kind of rapport with someone within a department that they're interested in applying for, who already looks like would be a good fit for them, then once they have developed that relationship, everything else becomes much easier. And so, I mean, Cambridge is a space that can be very rewarding in terms of the kind of networks that you can develop, the kind of resources that you will have access to, both financial resources and human resources, technical resources that are available for students. And so I would really encourage people to just apply. We all never thought we were Cambridge material, and we were all shocked when we got our acceptances. So I think the important thing is to put yourself out there, be counted, be represented, put yourself in the game.
Could not agree more. And clearly, all three of you are Cambridge material, and you are part of the institution. Okay, I have got two questions specifically for Sian. I'm going to give you both of them. One is very specific. Will your literacy tool be multilingual? And the other one is, why do you think there's such a shortage of white British women studying computer science?
Sure. Okay, big question. So yes, it will be multilingual. So I think a lot of the technology that I work on has applicability for different languages. In particular, one of the things that I really emphasize in the PhD is the fact that the first language that you have can really impact what you find difficult. So it's something that really does need to be in the equation. Part of the reason that I find this topic so interesting is it's so individual. Even at a domain level. So, you know, I don't know anything about law, so I'm sure there's a lot of terminology that I would find really difficult. And I think I wanted to reiterate as well, actually, that this isn't just about people who are at a low level, because you or I can benefit from text simplification if it's in a domain specific way. But to answer the question, yes, it will be definitely, these tools can be used for different languages. And why aren't there as many British females in computer science? I think that, I mean, for me, I went to an all-girls school. Computer science wasn't on the curriculum. Now, obviously, there's a pipeline problem there, because I think it's very difficult if you've never been exposed to computer science to even know that you can do that as an option, or that you can orientate yourself that way. It is changing, and part of my degree, actually, I had to go into primary schools and kind of teach computer science. We were building a little app, and I think that was really nice, because I think a lot of the girls there were like saying, oh, what, you know, that this is really interesting, like I could be a computer scientist. I think generally we could do with getting more computer scientists in Britain, because I think we've been kind of slow to get that into the curriculum, but it is changing. And I think, you know, there's a pipeline problem, and it needs to have grassroots sort of, you know, teach it in the schools, and then more and more people will be encouraged to actually do this at degree level.
Great, thank you. Now I've got two questions for Nilesh now. So the first is, will you continue to do research once you're a doctor? And the second is, do you think the cancer treatment you're working on will become a reality? You can answer those in any order you like.
I'll try and answer the second one first, about the cancer treatment becoming a reality. I'm honestly not sure, because there's so many steps in between me doing research on my bench and using that research in patients. So many different steps it needs to go through, and there's points of failure in every single one of those steps. So I really hope that it works out, and my PhD will be the foundation for that. But I will also completely understand if it doesn't. But even if my PhD doesn't exactly work out, I think the concepts that I've developed in my PhD could be carried forward, and eventually someday it might be relevant to someone else's research, or to be used in a different way that I didn't conceive before in patients. And to answer the first question about continuing research as a doctor, I'd love to. So I think being there, working with patients, I'll be able to understand the real challenges they face, and be able to target my research in a different way than I'm doing right now, by actually understanding what the patients need and what's going on in the ward, in that kind of sense. And also, if the PhD goes well, I'd love to keep consulting with the lab or with industry to develop that further and make it a reality that can be used in patients.
Great, thank you very much. And Rumbidzai, a question for you about your research. You were intending to do your fieldwork in Ethiopia, I think you said. And obviously, you're not based in Cambridge at the moment, but you have been in Cambridge. Have there been any insights or advantages that you've noticed from looking at Africa from Cambridge? Has that helped? And maybe the networks, developing what you were saying about that, the networks in Cambridge, has that helped give you insights into your research?
Definitely. I mean, one of the things that being in Cambridge does is to sort of pave your way into this pool of resources. But then when you delve into those resources, you then recognize how a lot of them are saying exactly the same thing about your subject area and your area of research. And in doing so, you then begin to ask yourself these questions about how come this group of people who have been researching this particular region for years have not thought about responding to these questions in this particular way, right? And it drives you into the conversation on decolonizing and decolonizing the area of international law itself, and how the ways in which, the canon, as we call it, has developed over the years and continues to reproduce itself through current scholarship without being challenged in any way. And so it provides me with an opportunity to come and say, wait a minute, none of these things that you're saying actually make sense to me as an African coming from Africa who has lived these experiences that you're talking about. And so it's an opportunity for me, as much as I learn from that existing knowledge, to also bring my voice into the discipline and challenge certain aspects in which Africa as a space is interacted with in knowledge production processes, and then what that knowledge that is produced about Africa does to the continent as a whole. So I think that has been one of the most interesting aspects of being in Cambridge and researching Africa from Cambridge. I remember one of my housemates when I arrived for the MPhil in African Studies, when she asked me, so what are you here to study? And I said, I'm doing the MPhil in African Studies. And she's like, oh, like you needed to be in the UK to do that. And in my head, I said, actually, yes, because the reason why I've had to come here to study this is because there's a whole history to the existence of programs on African studies within Europe that has shaped African, policies and development policies that have shaped the trajectory of Africa's politics, Africa's economies, Africa's societies. And so it's important for me to come here where the resources are, for me to access them, to then find a way of engaging with them, and in that process, then challenging those views and contributing to shaping a new understanding of who Africans are, what Africa is, and how the world ought to see Africa.
Excellent. Thank you very much for that. Look, we are nearly out of time, and I'm going to give you each one final question. You've already told me what your plans are after your doctorate. But let's look ahead 10 years' time. Where do you think each of you will be, and what will you be doing in 10 years' time? Sian, do you want to start?
So hopefully Dr. Gooding by that point, and well, hopefully a lot sooner than 10 years. I don't know. I mean, what I'm working on for my PhD, this isn't just, I think, for my PhD, like I really do believe in the research that I'm doing. I think that AI has artificial intelligence. We can use it for social good in a lot of different ways. I'm really passionate about educational applications of artificial intelligence. So in an ideal world, maybe in 10 years' time, I would be the CEO of a company that is building, educational apps for all sorts of different things, because I think, medical literature that the government put out, these are the sorts of things that really do need to be simplified for people at all different levels. So yeah.
Great, thank you very much. Nilesh, where do you think you'll be in 10 years' time?
Well, hopefully I'll be a practicing doctor by then. But, if I think of myself when I was 12, I wouldn't have imagined 10 years in the future I'd be at Cambridge researching how to kill cancer in a completely new way that hasn't been thought of before. So, I mean, I can have all my hopes and dreams right now, but who knows, could completely change again like it has right now.
Okay, good answer. And Rumbidzai, where do you think you'll be in 10 years' time?
Hopefully, a very influential diplomat working at the African Union. That's wishful thinking. But I mean, I see myself working within the African institutions like the African Union, shaping the politics of the region and sort of influencing how the region sees itself and places itself in global politics. It's something that I'm very passionate about.
Right.
Africa. Yeah, because of the complexities of Africa's history with colonialism and how that has shaped our different countries. I'm very interested in influencing the ways in which that organization sort of influences the way in which Africa, finds its positioning in global politics. So yeah, that's the kind of work I intend to do pretty much for the rest of my life, yeah.
Excellent. And good luck to all three of you in that. Thank you so much for your time. I'm afraid, everybody, that's all we have time for now. Thank you for your really interesting questions. And I'm afraid I couldn't ask them all and they couldn't all be answered. I do want to thank our wonderful panel, Sian, Rumbidzai and Nilesh. Thank you so much for sharing your fascinating research and also telling us about your life at Cambridge and your hopes and dreams beyond that. The next Cambridge conversation will focus on our new Cambridge Children's Hospital, and that will take place next month on the 29th of April. On the 14th of April, we will celebrate the Gates Cambridge Scholars Programme's 20th anniversary, when the Vice-Chancellor will host an online event with a focus on climate change. And in the meantime, as I said at the start, this conversation will shortly be posted on our YouTube channel. Thank you, everybody who's joined us. Thank you for your engagement with the University of Cambridge. And finally, thank you again so much, Sian, Nilesh and Rumbidzai. Really good to talk to you. Thank you, everybody. Bye-bye.